the drive to the Valley of David and Goliath. Psyched. Oh, I can read it. Actually, it shows up. You just focus, you zoom way in on it, and it picks it all up. A monument to the Challenger.
What's the Challenger here? The pillar, disappeared. Yeah.
Goliath and David somewhere in the valley. The names are between Soho and Azekah. You heard that. Soho, I know it's hard to pronounce. It's Soho and Azekah. Am I right?
Yeah.
But they gathered. So, Soho and Azekah.
Yeah.
So Soho will be that mountain, and Azekah will be this mountain. And the valley of Elah is where the battlefield took place. Sure, I cannot give you the inch, as usual. Forgive me about the inch. Oh, that's Elah. What do you mean?
We were using a different point, I guess, because it was such a clear respect between, we were at a crossroads between two valleys.
So, that's it. But maybe we came from another side there, but we came to the same route.
We came from over
From
there.
that side, yeah, okay. Yeah, but we see both mountains.
Okay.
See both mountains.
Okay.
This will be the Azekah, and that will be the Soho side, and somewhere here.
We came from over there.
From over there, but this is the same route. I have no other one.
Yeah.
All right, great story.
You have to be patient.
REA says he has a spare brook, but Monty has no more.
It's a little long, but very interesting, so be patient.
Little long, hard to listen to long scripture, but here we go.
Tell us where that's
1 Samuel 17. David, remember, is just a young boy now, and even though God has anointed through Samuel to be the future king, nobody knows about that, and he was a young shepherd boy. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes-Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and camped in the valley of Elah, right where we are, and drew up in battle array to encounter the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, while Israel stood on the mountain on the other side. Now y'all look over there at those two mountain ranges, one on our right, one on our left.
Which was where?
I'm sorry, the reforested that.
Okay, the reforested is
The
Israelis on the reforested, and the Saul's side is on the one where they're not trees. Then a champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. That's about 9 feet tall. A cubit, y'all, is the distance from your elbow to the end of your middle finger, and it's usually about 18 inches on most folks. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was clothed with scale armor, which weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. 5,000 shekels. Anybody got a translation of how much that is?
A lot.
125 pounds. He also had bronze greaves on his legs and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders, and the shaft of the spear was like a weaver's beam, and the head of the spear weighed 600 shekels of iron. So he's carrying a lot. And his shield carrier was walking before him. And he stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel and said to them, "Why do you come out to draw in battle array? Am I not the Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will become your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall become our servants and serve us. Now, that's not a bad idea for war, having the president and the prime minister of nations get out there and battle it out. But there's a lot on the line. If you got a kind of weak or sissified president that time, it's going to be kind of tough.
Sissified?
Yes, sissified. Again, the Philistines said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we might fight together. Then Saul and all Israel heard these words of Israel, of the Philistine, and they were dismayed and greatly afraid. In other words, he was very intimidating. Can you picture him standing out here in this valley shouting up at the hill where the Israelites are? When Saul and all Israel heard these words, they were greatly dismayed and afraid. Now David, the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons, and Jesse was old in the days of Saul, advanced in years among men. And the 3 older sons of Jesse had gone after Saul to the battle. And the names of these 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest of his boys. Now the 3 oldest followed Saul. They were in the army. David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's flock at Bethlehem. Now one of the things about David is he has already been serving in Saul's palace as a harpist because Saul has a problem with depression because of this, and that was a result of the sin in his life and turning from God and the assault of a demon in his life.
By the way, it's not far from Bethlehem. Bethlehem is on that corner there.
Not far from Bethlehem, right here.
Grounds of Bethlehem could have been here.
Okay, so we're not far there. But anyway, David had gone back and forth from the palace to shepherd his father's flock. But it's also interesting at this point, Saul doesn't seem to have any idea who David is, even though he's been playing the harp in his palace and the soothing music has been calming his nerves. But, you know, when you're a king and a young guy in the palace, you probably don't pay much attention to who it is. The Philistine came forward morning and evening for 40 days and took his stand. Then Jesse said to David his son, take now for your brothers an ephah of this roasted grain and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to your brothers. Bring also these 10 cups of cheese to the commander of their 1,000, and look at the welfare of your brothers, and bring back news of them. For Saul and they and all the men of Israel are in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. So David arose early in the morning and left the flock with the keeper and took the supplies and went as Jesse had commanded. And he came to the circle of the camp while the army was going out in battle array, shouting the war cry. It wasn't doing a whole lot of good on the war cry at this stage, but you can imagine for 40 days they had the war cry, and then they stood there shaking in their boots, scared to death. And Israel and the Philistines drew up in battle array, army against army. And then David left his baggage in the care of the baggage keeper and ran to the battle line and entered in order to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine from Gath, named Goliath, was coming up from the army of the Philistines, and he spoke these same words, and David heard them. And when all the men of Israel saw the man, they fled from him, and they were greatly afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who is coming up? Surely he is coming up to defy Israel. And it will be that the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. Then David spoke to the men who were standing by him, saying, what will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God? Now, right off, we see David as a unique young man. Saul and all the army scared to death. David gets interested in the reward that's offered, and he also is thinking in his mind, you're scared of this guy, and we've got God on our side? And the people answered him in one accord with this word, saying, thus it will be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David, and he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you have come down in order to see the battle. But David said, what have I done now? It was just a question. You know, older brother, jealous of his younger brother, who's already been anointed by God. He's not happy about him being there at the battle. All kind of family dynamics going on. Then he turned away from him to another and said the same thing, and the people answered the same thing as before. When the words which David spoke were heard, they told them to Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Then Saul said to David, you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're but a youth, while he's been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant was tending his father's sheep when a lion or a bear came and took the lamb from the flock. I went after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by the beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taught in the armies of the living God. Now note David's faith, but also note how God has been preparing a young man who in obscurity, behind the scenes where nobody noticed, was faithfully doing his task day in and day out. And when he had a chance to do something great in the public eye, he was ready because he had faithfully and courageously served the Lord behind the scenes all those years when nobody was looking. Great lesson about being prepared for those big moments in life. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. Then Saul clothed David with his garments and put a bronze helmet on his head, and he clothed him with armor. And David girded his sword over his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. So David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them, and he took them off. Now remember, Saul was a head taller than anybody else in Israel, the most handsome man in all of Israel. From a human perspective, the ideal guy you choose for a king. From a spiritual perspective, he was the pits. And David took his armor on himself, and it evidently swallowed him up. He could hardly walk. The sword was dragging, the armor was dragging, and he wasn't used to it. He hadn't tested it. So he said, no, I'll just do it with what I know I'm talented in, basically. And he just also depend on the Lord there rather than depending on Saul's armor. He wasn't going to try to be like somebody else. He was going to be himself and use the gifts that God had given him. Verse 40, and he took his stick in his hand and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in the shepherd's bag which he had, even in his pouch, and his sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. Then the Philistine came on and approached David with the shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy with a handsome appearance. More insight about David there. And Philistine said to David, Am I a dog that you would come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine also said to David, Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field. And note the pride of Goliath, and how the Bible teaches that pride cometh before the fall. He's insulted. They sent out this teenage boy, never has been a warrior, to fight him. Why, he's going to throw his body to the birds. Verse 45, Then David said to the Philistine, You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you. And I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And here we have David playing the Joe Namath of the Israelites, predicting they were going to beat the mighty NFL, or Cassius Clay when he fought Sonny Liston years ago and was given no chance at all. He's making it clear. But his strength is not in self like those two athletes. His strength is in the Lord. He's got this confidence because of his faith in God. There's no doubt in David's mind. It's just a matter of time, because looking at God compared to the giant problem of Goliath is making Goliath look like a little ant or a flea. And certainly a perspective all of us want to keep in mind when we face the giant challenges of life, the giant problems of life that so overwhelm us. We keep our focus on the Lord, the problem seems small. We keep our focus on the problem or the challenge, and it will overwhelm us. But David kept his thought in his mind where it needs to be. Then it happened when the Philistine rose and came and drew near to meet David, that David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand into his bag and took from it a stone and slung it, and struck the Philistine on his forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead, so he fell on his face to the ground. Thus David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. He struck the Philistine and killed him, but there was no sword in David's hand. So he ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Now try to picture that, folks, right where we are here. There they are standing behind that giant who's in the valley while they're on the hill over here, safe. They see what happens, and they start running. And the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the slain Philistines lay along the way to Sharim, even to Gath and Ekron. And the sons of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines and plundered their camps. Then David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his weapons in his tent. Now when Saul saw that David was going out against the Philistines, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, sort of his colonel, and he says, Abner, whose son is this young man? Who is that kid? Who is this fellow? Of course, he'd been playing the harp in his palace for a while, but Saul was so out of it, he probably didn't notice.
He was ashamed that he was afraid to do that, so
yeah.
he pretends that, who is that?
That's right. Saul's, Monty says that Saul was ashamed that he was afraid to go out there, and so he said, who is this? He was...
That kid spoke to him before and asked him permission to kill.
Yeah.
He asked him permission to kill, and suddenly he doesn't know who he is.
Yeah. Yeah, Monty says this kid asked him permission to kill, and now suddenly he doesn't know who he is. It's just Saul, you know. Bless his heart. He was a weak one. And Abner said, by your life, O king, I do not know. And the king said, you inquire whose son the youth is. So when David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the Philistine's head in his hand. I want you to picture this, folks. Here's a young teenage boy with no weapons, the head of the giant in his hand, standing there with the king, looking up, because he's got to look up to Saul, a head taller than him, looking up to the king. And I want you to think about the contrast of these two men because of their faith in God and where they were in their relationship with the Lord. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? And David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. It's very interesting that David still shows respect for Saul because of his office, even though he obviously is a much greater man than Saul from the very beginning. And what a contrast, you see, the shift of power, or the really, in a sense, publicly for the first time, Israel was noting what God had already noted, because it says in 1 Samuel, I believe it's chapter 7, that God measures a man by his heart, not by outward appearance. And even though Saul outwardly, I forget the verse, one of y'all can help me with it later, but even though Saul outwardly was the perfect choice to be the king of Israel, in his heart he had a small heart. He was a little man in his heart. David was not as big, but he had a big heart for God, and that made him a courageous leader of men. And what happened, I'm sure, at that moment, is that the men of Israel also began in their hearts to shift their allegiance. Even though it didn't happen publicly or officially, their hearts began to be drawn to David, because how can you not admire this young man?